What'd he say his name was? Gebatron.
Hell Let Loose Vietnam has been officially announced, and I think that's pretty exciting. So what we'll do in this video is I'll just show the trailer by itself for those of you who haven't seen it yet. Then we'll go through it and I'll do a breakdown of the trailer and tell you what I know so far, or what I'm allowed to talk about so far. And then after that, I'll answer the biggest question I had when we found out about this, which was more or less, what does this news mean for the existing Hell Let Loose game? As well as answer some other questions, check the timestamps if you want to skip or jump around. Okay, here's the trailer.
Peggy 16.
Alright, pretty cool trailer, so let's break it down. We start off with the year 1965 across the screen, and I must admit that I don't know as much about the Vietnam War as I do about World War II, the history and the equipment and all, but I do know that the conflict started in some form as early as the 1950s with fighting between the French and the Viet Minh, more or less culminating in a major French defeat at Dien Bien Phu. This led to Vietnam being split into North and South. And at this point, and into the early 1960s, the US started to support the South Vietnamese government and their armed forces by sending in military advisors and the like. In 1964, we get the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where U.S. destroyers were attacked, leading to the U.S. government taking the necessary steps to escalate the war. Which brings us to the 1965 we see on the screen, which is when the first U.S. combat troops land in Vietnam, marking the shift to direct U.S. involvement in the war. So that's the history, but something that I think is really nice about this is that, in contrast to how the current Hell Let Loose game was developed, we get to start nice and early in the conflict. Hell Let Loose's first maps were all 1944 and later, focusing on D-Day and after, which meant that when maps that took place earlier in World War II were introduced, there was a lot of inaccurate equipment on the field, such as STG-44s in Stalingrad and Panthers in El Alamein and, stuff like that. Now, some of that was adjusted to make it more accurate, but those are some issues that arose from starting in the middle. Now, I am speculating here. Hell Let Loose does have some quote-unquote realistic elements, but it still plays it loose when it comes to time-accurate equipment and uniforms. But this 1965 start date does give Expression Games the opportunity to start with early war equipment and then expand on that throughout development. We will see how it goes, but I do prefer this early war start versus a mid or late war start. So right off the bat, we are shown helicopters, and these will be flyable in the game, capable of everything from troop deployment and extraction, dropping supplies, reconnaissance, and aerial firepower. These things should prove to be a lot of fun. Now we see the river patrol boats featured heavily, and these will also be in the game. The Vietnam maps are designed around extensive river networks, so control of these lanes will likely play a key role in map control. And while we're on this topic, I want to talk a little bit about the asymmetrical approach that they are going to be taking with Hell Let Loose Vietnam. As I said, the US will be getting these heavily armed patrol boats, while the Vietnamese will be getting a stealthier version. That's all I know about that right now, but we'll talk more about the asymmetrical asymmetry here in a bit. Now we see the mortars that everyone has been asking for, and yes, these are playable in the game. Looks like a pretty devastating napalm strike here, which transitions into a section that is really highlighting the dense jungle and how that might impact some gameplay with players that can control their trigger finger a little bit. And now it's actual gameplay footage with helicopters, grenade launchers, armor, flamethrowers, RPGs, and just general chaos. Hell Let Loose Vietnam, coming sometime in 2026, available on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 5. Now, the biggest concern I had when we were told about this was its impact on the current and future development of the original Hell Let Loose, and I got the best news I could have hoped for on this front. Expression Games built a second team to support development of both titles simultaneously. So we don't have to worry about anyone abandoning our precious World War II game for this flashy new project, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. As a matter of fact, they even state that development on one title can help the other if there are mechanics and systems they think will carry over from one title to the next. They say those decisions will be decided on a case-by-case basis, but that's still a big positive in my book. Hell Let Loose Vietnam will be an Unreal Engine 5 game, and we have been told specifically that there are no plans to upgrade Hell Let Loose to UE5. I'm fine with that. Hell Let Loose Vietnam is its own standalone title. It's not a sequel or a DLC or anything like that. You won't be able to access it from Hell Let Loose. You will have to purchase it separately. I think this is pretty good news too, as it means that this game has been built from the ground up. My personal prediction here is that Expression Games is going to have taken all the lessons they learned from unscrambling Hell Let Loose and have a title that will function much better and be better at handling additions, changes, and updates than the current Hell Let Loose. Not only that, but this should be extra good news for console players as they get a game that has been designed with them in mind from the start, whereas the original was a PC exclusive title until the console versions were tacked on much later in development. Again, I'm speculating, but I would expect console performance to be much better in Hell Let Loose Vietnam than in Hell Let Loose. It's still 50v50 with more or less the same team composition. Basically, if you know how Hell Let Loose works, you're going to feel right at home playing Hell Let Loose Vietnam. Of course, equipment will be different and have different capabilities, and the forces will be, asymmetrical, but you won't be going through any huge learning curves. Should be a relatively easy transition. However, I'd like to point out that of course you won't need to have played Hell Let Loose to be able to play Hell Let Loose Vietnam. Now on some more of that asymmetry, we'll have US forces versus the NVA or North Vietnamese Army. So while the US gets their helicopters in the sky, the NVA will have the ability to construct tunnel networks. Now it's unclear how this will all work in detail, but I can tell you that these tunnels are an extension or expansion on the current garrison system, and they'll allow troops to redeploy quickly through player-constructed tunnel entrances. They will enable surprise attacks, they'll hide troop movement, and allow for rapid deployments. Sounds like coming up with good tactics on how to best use these will be essential for the NVA players. Speculating here, but maybe they are like rapid deploy garrisons that will be much harder to find than a regular garrison or something. We'll have to wait and see, but however they work, I'm really interested in how this asymmetry will play out and what that means for how each faction will play. They say proper tutorials will be a major focus, so I may be out of a job. There will be open beta testing pre-launch starting in 2026, so make sure to wishlist it so you don't miss out if helping shape games is something you enjoy or something you're interested in. Some other things, no single player campaign, there will be DLC, but no details on that yet. Same anti-cheat software as Hell Let Loose, so easy anti-cheat. Controller support for PC, online connection connection is required, and yeah, so all pretty good stuff. There is one thing I found a little disappointing in the info that we were given. So it's planned that Hell Let Loose Vietnam will release with 6 distinctive maps, and they say that the designs for these maps draw from important events in the war. They specifically name Operation Starlight and Operation Piranha. Now this is really good still, as those operations did take place in 1965, which means that we won't be skipping all around the war's timeline with maps. So what's the disappointing part here? They say that these maps are not exact recreations of real-world sites. Now, I know that not everyone in the Hell Let Loose community likes that the vast majority of the maps are very close to their real-world counterparts as much as I do, but I always thought it was one of the things that made Hell Let Loose special. So for me, that is a slight disappointment. But now, having said that, I am also willing to see what we get here, as I know that the nature of the Vietnam War was very different than that of World War II. Like I said, I'm not a Vietnam War expert, but if memory serves, this was more of a body count war rather than a war over strategic locations like cities, ports, major transportation hubs, etc. It may have been hard in some cases for the development team to just naturally find battlefields as interesting in that regard for this conflict. So while I'm sad to see that aspect go, I am looking forward to see what these initial 6 maps bring us, as they do say that they are still very heavily grounded in those real operations and locations and will still provide an authentic experience. And on top of that, there is no indication that the new maps released for Hell Let Loose will be anything but accurate representations of real-world locations. So it's just something that will be a little different between the two games. Now on to a bonus observation for those who stuck around until the end. Something that I noticed while looking at the screenshots featuring armor. Look at the tank tracks. Then look at the marks left behind. Now, if this is going to work like how I think, we will get these traces left behind in real time. These are called track traces in other games that feature this, and I hope I'm right about it. Not that it's consequential or anything, but it would be a really cool detail, and depending on how long these effects stay on the ground, they could even be used in hunting enemy armor. But like I said, that is pure speculation just based on what I see in these 2 screenshots. Well, what do you think about this news? What do you think about Hell Let Loose Vietnam? Let us know down below. Thank you very much for watching, as I know you had many other options out there that are covering this right now, but you chose to support this channel, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to pull the trigger on that like button and subscribe to stay up to date on Hell Let Loose Vietnam and Hell Let Loose news. See you in the next one.